people that you've traveled around the world for 4 years through 40 countries, the first thing they usually tell you is, wow, that is cool. But before I get started today, I need to establish a really, really important point. Traveling around the world for 4 years is cool, but me, Andy Stoll, not actually that cool. So let me explain. When I was in 3rd grade, my mother sent me to self-esteem camp. Actual place, you can giggle, I can take it now. In fourth grade, my mom sat me down on the edge of the bed, and she said, it was the first day of summer, and she said, Andy, this summer, you're going to make one new friend, because I had one other friend. The guy was Jeff. We hung out with for about 3 months. I've never seen the guy since, and he's never friended me on Facebook. Suffice it to say, I was a really quiet and shy child. I generally played sports, and I kept to myself. But that all changed my sophomore year in high school, which is the first story that I want to tell you this afternoon. So I was in geometry class. I was 15 years old. I was doing my thing, and this guy, Mike, who sat next to me, handed me a petition and asked me to sign it. He was running for the student council. And I signed it and was handing it back, and he said a really odd thing. He said, hey, Andy, you should think about running for the student council. You'd be pretty good. Now, I don't know about you guys, but in my high school, student council was like a referendum on popularity. The popular kids would run, the popular kids would win, and that's just how it worked. So just to help you understand the context of this story, if I had run at that point for student council, and let's say there were 32 people on the ballot, I would have come in 33rd. Like, I don't actually know how that works, but that's probably what would have happened. So I dismissed the thought, handed the petition back to Mike, and I went on about my day. A couple days later, I was watching television. It was a presidential election year. You guys know how that goes. It's like negative commercial, negative commercial, negative commercial, just back and forth. And I had a really stupid thought. The stupid thought was, wouldn't it be interesting if someone, or at least funny, if someone made a funny political ad? I mean, think about it. You've seen thousands of political ads in your life, and you've never seen a funny one. And so my theory was, if someone made a funny political ad, they would just win, because we're all tired of the negativity. Also a fairly dumb thought that you usually sort of forget about. The interesting thing was, a couple days later, the two ideas from the week collided, and I had a really stupid thought, which was, wouldn't it be interesting, or at least funny, if I ran for student council in my high school, but like as a joke, I would make a funny political campaign, and sort of as a elbow in the side of the establishment, sort of mock the popular kids, I would just like make fun of the whole process. So I called my two friends, my only two friends, invited them over, and we dressed up like fishermen, and we went in my backyard and we took pictures. Let me explain. So in the 90s, there was a series of advertisements that Budweiser put on for Bud Light, and there was an adult son and his elderly father, and they're on a lake and they're fishing. It's like misty, there's loons, it's early in the morning, there's sentimental music playing, they're drinking Bud Light. And the son turns to his father and says, Dad, you have been a great dad. You have always been there for me and supportive of me, and Dad, I love you, man. Loon, sentimental music, fog, and then the father looks at his son, and after a comic pause, and says, son, you're not getting my Bud Light. That was way funnier in the 90s. Like, the humor was totally different. Trust me, that would have been hilarious if you were there. So, we take these pictures, we dress up like fishermen, we make a comic book style poster of me and my buddy Roger, and I'm talking to Roger, and I say, Roger, you've been a good friend, a great friend, you've been always supportive of me, and you know what, Roger, I love you, man. And then the last sort of box of the series on this poster, Roger looks at me and says, you're not getting my vote for student council. Andy. Oh man, humor's totally different in the 90s, that would have killed, you guys would have been falling out of your chair, the internet has wrecked you, let's just put it that way. So I go and we print these things up. I'm so nervous at this point. I almost bail out, but I wait till the last human moment. It's Friday at 6 o'clock, the week before the student council election. I sneak into my high school. Everyone is gone. The athletes are gone. There's like a janitor and a piece of paper going down the hallway. That's it. And I sneak into my high school and I take these posters and I put them around all over the place next to the legitimate people running for student council posters. And I remember walking out of the school and just feeling like $1,000,000. I walked out and I just felt, I was like, oh man, I did it. Like I took this dumb idea in my head and I turned it into this thing. And I was really, really happy. My two friends are going to think it's really funny and, elbow on the side of the establishment, the popular kids, ha ha ha. To help you understand my mindset, by Monday, I actually had forgotten that I did this. So 7 o'clock, I come into school. And I walk in the front door, and something is different. And I realize very quickly that everyone is looking at me. The invisible student is invisible no more. And I'm trying to decide if that's a good or a bad thing. And this guy, Billy, which was one of my classes, he comes running down, he goes, "Andy Stoll, I love you, man!" And he gives me this really big hug. If there was ever a moment in my life that I could have bought popularity, it was then, and it cost $1 a poster at Kinko's. And the more I printed, the more I hung up, the more popular I got. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And the moment that I knew that I really made it was Thursday of the election week. I was walking to class, and there was this group of senior class cheerleaders. You know what I mean? They're tall, blonde, beautiful, they smell good, like that group of women. So they're there, and I'm walking to class, and Tiffany, who is the captain of the senior high cheerleading squad, looks at me and she goes, "Hey, you're Andy Stoll." I looked at her and I said, "Yeah, Tiffany, you know, I am. And I know we haven't really talked, but that's not at all what I said. That's one of those, it's like you wish I said that. I think what I actually did was squeak. Like I think I went, "Me!" and then dropped my books. She walks over, and I'm not lying, she walks over and she goes, "Andy Stoll, I love you, man." And she gives me this really big hug. And I could smell her perfume. I think I can smell it now, actually, if I take myself. And so, it was amazing. My life was made right there. So, Friday, the next day comes around. The election is wrapping up. I'm leaving school. It's 3:30. Mike, the guy from geometry, sees me and he goes, "Hey, Andy, you should look at the election results. You might find them interesting." And I was like, "Dude, Mike, Tiffany hugged me. Like, I'm good. I don't really need anything." And so I walked over to this trophy case that had this 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that had the election results, and 32 people had run for the student council in my class. They took 10 people and 2 alternates, so 12 in total, and I looked down the list and I found my name, and I had come in 12th. So I had got on the student council. And I remember standing there in that hallway in my high school with that piece of paper on the trophy case and all the activity behind me, and I'm looking at this, and just one single thought goes through my mind, and that thought is, "Oh, shit. What have I got myself into?" Because that actually wasn't the point. Like, I didn't even know what student council did. I was like, they student, they council. I don't know what they do. Like, I wasn't supposed to get elected. So they sent me to student council camp, which is only slightly cooler than self-esteem camp. But all jokes aside, it was a leadership camp. What I learned was that if I spoke up, people would listen, that my jokes were sometimes funny, and that if I tried to lead, people might actually follow. This opened up a whole new world to me and led me down this completely different path that was much different than where I think the direction of my life was headed. By the time I graduated, I was the vice president of my student council, and it really was a seminal moment where my life shifted. So fast forward 10 years. I graduated from college. I was bright-eyed, I was bushy-tailed, I wanted to change the world. In the weeks following my graduation, I had a really, really huge realization, the realization of a very big problem, which is that I wanted to change the world, but I had no freaking clue how it actually worked. And what I mean by that is I had never traveled abroad, I had never seen the world, and I realized that was something I had to correct. So I looked around at all the things that you can do when you graduate from college to travel, the Peace Corps, teach English in China, you could volunteer at an orphanage in Costa Rica, and I looked at all these things, and I thought, I can't possibly choose one of these things. I'll just do them all. Take a trip around the world. Problem was I didn't have any money. And in fact, I owed the federal government about $25,000 in student loans, which if you actually think about it, it's a really good reason to leave the country. So I took a really normal job fixing computers, and I gave myself a deadline of 3 years. 3 years, almost to the day I was 26 years old. I quit my job, I sold everything I owned, and I bought a one-way ticket to China, and I just left. I'd never been outside of the country in my entire life. I was incredibly scared. The goal was to go around the world for a year. 4 years later, I came back. I did all sorts of things. I handed out microloans in China. I lived in the slums in India. I lived in a small village in Samoa. I swam with great white sharks in South Africa. And I have a lot of stories to tell. As you might be able to tell, I love telling stories, and when I come to your campus, that's what I do. I tell stories. Stories from living with the locals in 40 different countries around the world over 4 years. Stories from my life that allowed me, or that taught me lessons about how to go from being a shy, quiet kid to living my life's biggest dream by the time that I was 30. What I want you to learn from those stories is, first of all, that I'm just a guy. I'm nobody special. I don't have magic powers. In fact, I was really recently in your chair. And I remember sitting in college and seeing this predictable linear life path laid out before me that said graduate, get a job, find a spouse, buy a house, adopt a dog, buy a bigger house. And I looked at that and I said to myself, there has to be more to life than that. And so I decided I would question what seemed inevitable and I would explore what was even possible. And so when I come and I share these stories, they're the lessons that I've learned, and the goal is to help you understand that if you have a vision of a life that you want to live, maybe a life that just seems slightly out of reach, how do you actually achieve that? Whether your dream is to travel around the world, to start a business, to be a writer, to be a musician. That's what my stories and the lessons I learned. I hope I can share with you some of what I've learned. I'll be at the booth with the college agency, 702, the ones handing out the texting gloves crew. Come visit if you want to talk about travel. If you are interested in traveling around the world and you want to come talk to me, I will share a secret with you that will allow you to travel without not a lot of money, leave in 2 weeks, and go around the world for a year. But I hope that you come talk to me about what we can co-create together on your campus. And I'd like to leave you with a couple images from my trip around the world, and I look forward to talking to you all soon. Thank you very much.